So, most business plans tend to die in beautifully designed slide decks. So, the problem tends to be that most teams juggle too many priorities. No one sort of like owns the outcomes, and weekly work drifts from the big goal, right? We get caught up in the minutia, the whirlwind of the day to day. So, in this episode, we're going to teach you a very simple goal system. We call it GPS. That's goals, priorities, strategies. This approach helps you set direction, assign ownership, and create a weekly rhythm that turns plans into results. Now, it was interesting. I was actually talking to a friend of mine who recently started a new business. It's actually a tech business that also has a hard money lending component in it. And he's serving investors looking to buy and flip homes. And it was interesting. We were talking about his goals for 2026. And he had come to this conclusion or this realization that, in 24, as 2025 approached, his goal was all based on revenue. It was just revenue growth, kept it really simple, and they blew past their goal, far exceeded that goal that they set. And so when we were chatting, his kind of like mindset started to get into, well, gosh, if we exceeded that goal, what else can we do? And started creating like 10 and 12 and 15 different goals for the year. And so as we talked, I really encouraged him to keep it simple, right? And just focus on that revenue growth. It worked so well the year before. And so I actually shared with him this strategy that we're going to talk about today because at the end of the day, you can't just set a revenue target or a profit target or sort of like a conversion target and not have a plan behind it. But where the challenges come in is when you try to do so many different things and use clarity on the simple things that really matter, right? Those levers that are sort of like the least amount of effort with a high amount of output or impact, right? And identifying those things in your business can be challenging, but this process will really help you slow down and find out what those things are. And so let's break it down one by one. So the GPS system, right? Some people also call this the 135, but the idea is you have one goal for your business. Now, you can also do a GPS goal sheet for your personal life. Like maybe it's some things you want to work on in your relationship with your spouse or just personal goals that you'd like to set for yourself. But the idea is you have that one goal, that one measurable outcome for the next 12 months that you would like to accomplish or achieve. Now, before we go any further, I want to also mention that in my experience, I found that setting very aggressive goals, what I would say are tough but attainable goals, is the best approach. In other words, if you set a wimpy goal, you're going to get a wimpy sort of outcome, right? If you set a very large goal and an aggressive goal, you might fall a little bit short, but better than setting that wimpy goal and meeting it, right? So, challenging yourself to push a little bit further than you're even comfortable with. To me, a good goal should make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. In my experience, at least I can speak for myself, when I'm a little bit uncomfortable is when I tend to be the most productive, right? I tend to get into action faster when there's a little sort of uncomfort going on in that situation. So, for many businesses, that could be a revenue goal, as I mentioned with my friend there. It could be a transaction goal. But what is that one thing? If that thing happens, you will be happy and satisfied and excited about your year, right? So that one goal. Then you layer down into priorities, right? So these are sort of the pillars of your goal, right? So the goal sits atop these three priorities, or say pillars, just for the visual representation, right? So these are the big sort of priorities that sort of feed into that goal. So could be client experience, it could be sales, it could be marketing, it could be hiring, it could be whatever it takes that you sort of sit back and say, okay, in order to achieve this goal, we're going to need to accomplish these three things. We're going to really have to hone in on our sales funnel, right? Make sure we're optimizing each conversion down funnel, right? How do we maximize the amount of leads into appointments? How many appointments into booked conversations? How many of those conversations result in a sale, right? So that's for a sales organization. For marketing, it could be looking at your lead magnets and looking at the way you're attracting business to you. Maybe it's launching a podcast, not unlike you're listening to today. Whatever those things are that you think will help you achieve that goal. At my prior company, one of my pillars was always culture because I knew that if we had a happy team, then our results would follow, right? So layering in culture could be one of those pillars or priorities. It's really going to be up to you to have that conversation with yourself and with your team to determine what those three things are. So those priorities, those pillars sort of stand the goal up, right? Keep that goal at the top. And then from within those priorities, you start working on five strategies, right? So, what are the five things, the five strategies that if we accomplish, we'll make that priority. Check, boom, accomplished, and it'll feed up into you accomplishing that larger goal. Now, this is where like the magic really happens in these strategies. And so the key factor is these have got to be what we call SMART goals, right? So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So you can't say something like create 5 new lead magnets, right? That's okay. But okay, so when are you going to do that by? Are you going to do that in the first quarter, the second quarter? Sort of what's the purpose behind creating those lead magnets? What should that look like? And if it's successful, how do you measure it, right? And so was it accomplished or not? And was the end goal of that, right? So if you're, in this context talking about lead magnets, then obviously you're going to be looking to reduce your lead costs and your client acquisition costs by providing more compelling education material to your prospects that'll help juice those conversions and create more income as you grow your business, right? So you can't just say, once again, 5 new lead magnets. I'm going to create 5 new lead magnets in Q1. We're going to test those lead magnets out on Facebook and other social media platforms, measure the results. And at the end of that process, we're going to determine which 2 of those new 5 lead magnets we created are the ones we're going to roll with and double down on and increase our marketing spend on, right? So that's now you're getting closer to that SMART goal. We're going to have this done by this date. This is what we're going to do with it. And we're going to look for these measurable outcomes so we know that we're a success or we know that it's failed, right? And so in that context, once again, we're creating 5 because we just don't know which ones are going to work, right? So we got to work through those, test those, optimize them, and then look for that result that we're ultimately trying to achieve. So for me, the GPS system is beautiful for a few reasons because if done properly, it can live on a single printed page. And so what I always do is I have my GPS like right where it's visible on a day-to-day basis. So every day when I'm sitting at my desk working, that GPS document, that one-page business plan is right in front of my face. And really satisfying checking things off that list, right? When you accomplish those strategies, you knock them out and you see that result. So having it in front of you almost on a daily basis, literally, is going to be a critical factor to success here. So the bottom line is by doing it, by having it being simple, one page, it really just helps with your focus, right? Those constraints of having fewer goals actually forces some trade-offs, right? And so the urgent sort of stops hijacking the important, right? And we call that the whirlwind. That's just the emails that come through, the calls that come through on a daily basis, what I would call busy work that feels like at the end of the day, look, I accomplished all this stuff. I had this to-do list of 10 things and I checked all the boxes, but at the end of the day, did any of those 10 things actually move you closer to your goal, right? So having that clarity around these strategies that you're going to look at on a daily basis and knock out on a monthly and quarterly basis so that at the end of the year, all those things got accomplished, that's when the magic really happens. That clear line of sight, just knowing that it's simple, it's easy, everybody can understand it. It's one page. Once again, it's not like some 30-page slide deck that you have to go through and remember what did we agree to, who's doing what, who owns what. It's all spelled out. And then the magic happens in a sense when every department has their own GPS that's based off of yours, right? So within marketing, they're going to have 3 pillars. Within sales, they're going to have 3 pillars. Within, in our context, asset management, 3 pillars, acquisitions, 3 pillars. So it all just kind of feeds down from that overall goal and the overall priorities of the company. And then each department does that same process as they go through this goal setting for next year. And then once again, this is the best, right? Scorekeeping, right? Did we knock it out or did we not, right? Clear metrics with measurable results that tell us that we're on the right track or off track. So, how do you set that, right? How do you start this process? Well, the first is set the goal, so just use a single sentence. It should be really easy. You should memorize it. You should know what it is. If anybody asks you in an elevator, what's your big goal for this year? Boom, articulated, one sentence, simple, simple, simple. So, maybe in our world, it could be acquire 1,000 units of cash flowing multifamily by December 31st, maintaining a 1.35 debt service coverage ratio. That's not ours, but that's an example of one it could be. Simple, easy, everybody knows what it is, right? And then once you have that goal, start thinking about what are those priorities or those pillars that will help me accomplish that goal. So, ask yourself, what are the 3 things, if nailed, guarantee the goal, right? So it could be things like, asset management, client experience, operations, culture, whatever you think is most important, right? At Ferris Capital Partners today, we're a fairly small team. There's 10 of us. And I would say our culture is pretty tight. So I think a lot about our culture, but it's not really a pillar of my 2026 plan. So I feel like we've already done the work there to get it stood up where the culture's strong, everybody's aligned and marching in the same direction. But next year, as the company grows and we bring on more people, then all of a sudden culture could become more of an important factor. So every year, these pillars and priorities are going to change depending on the needs of your business. And then writing those strategies, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound goals and activities that you know you can do and get accomplished that'll help meet that priority, which will in turn get you closer to that goal. And when you're writing these strategies, once again, keep it visible, right? This is not like some secret mission you're on. You want everybody to know what you're on. So going back to my prior company, everybody looked at each other's GPS documents. So I knew exactly what everybody was working on. They knew what I was working on. And then as we built them together as a team, we can make sure that they all sort of mirror and match while also allowing for the priorities of that individual department to still be honored and accomplished, right? So that idea that they're all aligned, it's all working towards that same one goal. So, you know, um, here's some thoughts, like just some ideas on some priorities, right? So, we could talk about our capital engine. How are we going to raise capital? So, some of these strategies could be host 24 live webinars, target 35% attendance, and capture minimum 5% conversion to calls, right? Another one could be hit a 2-minute speed to lead on all inbound calls that come in. Any leads that come in are followed up with within 2 minutes. Speed to lead is one of those things that I cannot stress the importance enough. If you're in a sales oriented environment, the faster you can call those leads, the higher likelihood you are going to convert. I could do a whole episode just on that topic, but I can tell you at Mark Spain Real Estate, our prior company, we had our speed to lead down to 26 seconds for internet e leads, and we were answering live calls 90% of the time. And that one thing, getting that right, dramatically transformed our business. I mean, it led to the exit. I would say, if you ask me, one thing that we did was really two. One, we hired great people, but two, we took control of the leads and we ensured they were followed up with as quickly as possible. And I would say those two things alone led to the majority of our success. You can keep going, right? Deploy 7 email deal cadences. Whenever somebody signs up for a deal alert, make sure they're getting valuable educational information over the first 2 weeks that lead comes in. We want to maintain a 40% open rate with an 8% click through rate. So this goes back to SMART. Everything has to be measurable that you're looking for. In our acquisition department, for example, 10 broker touches a day. We're having 10 meaningful conversations with brokers a day. That's 200 a month. We're going to underwrite at least 100 deals a quarter. We're going to build out a vendor bench. We're going to make sure that we're talking with lenders and other capital sources to get information from them that we can utilize and leverage. Another example of a pillar could be our investor resident experience, right? So building that moat around our net operating income. So sending out those monthly investor updates on the 30th of each month and getting that right 100% of the time, making sure monthly distributions start between month 2 and 4 of ownership. 28-day transformation on every property accomplished 100% of the time, maintaining a Google rating above, say, 4.4% on each of our properties with a goal of 10 new reviews a quarter. So, once again, these things are just, you're going to have to look internally at your business and make those decisions. What are the things that are going to move the dial for you in your specific business? But one really cool thing I found is that most businesses the same, right? So how do we get more leads in? How do we convert more of those leads into sales? And then how do we keep those sales, those customers, those clients happy and coming back and doing business with us again and again? And at the end of the day, that's what business is all about. So some of these ideas I've thrown out here, just that we're going to be incorporating into our business plan at Ferris Capital Partners, are things that you can consider doing as well. I'm going to harp on this just a little bit. It is critical that these are SMART goals, though, specific. It's not, we're going to do more webinars. We're going to do a certain amount of webinars, measurable. How many are we going to do? What success looks like. That goes back when I used the webinar example of attendance rates, conversions to conversations, and deal alert signups could be another thing, right? Is it achievable? Do we have the time and capacity to do these things? Do Mark and I have the ability to do 2 webinars a month that are fresh and exciting and new and different, right? And if you can, if you say, well, gosh, that sounds like a lot, then you might need to pull back a little bit. And you can always increase your output if you find maybe one of these strategies works better than others. Because that's the bottom line, too. You're going to pick five strategies, and perhaps only two or three really move the dial in a big, meaningful way. So then you can pull back from the other two and maybe set those aside, put them back in the idea box and revisit them in the future, and just focus on those things that are leading to the most result, right? Lowest effort, highest impact is what I'm always thinking about. And then, make sure it's relevant. Like, doing these webinars, will that actually move the dial? Will that actually bring more investors to us? If the answer is no, then maybe think about something else. And then once again, time bound. When are we going to do these? At what point are we going to reach that 40% attendance rate? Maybe the first one's 2025. So by looking at that and having that goal of 40% in this context, and maybe we fall a little bit short on the first few webinars, we're going to have to think about our ad copy. We're going to have to think about our hook at the beginning of the podcast. We're going to have to think about our reminder cadence once somebody signs up. How many times are we reaching out to remind them? We don't want to push too hard and annoy people, but we don't want to send too few reminders and get below average results. So it's that idea of optimizing. So, yes, webinars are the thing, but there's a lot of things that go into that, right? That email cadence, as I mentioned, our follow up post webinar, the types of calls to action we're using on the webinar to lead to those book calls. So once again, you set this one strategy, but within that strategy, there might be a lot of different things you have to accomplish. But once again, the simpleness comes in the clarity of just going, we're going to do 24 webinars with a 40% attendance rate, with 8% of those attendees converting to a phone conversation. Now, once you have this plan built out, right, the bottom line is you have to keep it alive, right? You have to continue talking about it. So, in those meetings, right? So, at Ferris Capital Partners, we do the morning huddle, we have our weekly level 10 meeting, we do quarterly resets and reviews. And so, specifically bringing up those strategies, right? So, that goes back to what I love about this idea and how you do this one page plan. It's like my quarterly priorities are already sort of mapped out at the beginning of the year. And once again, as the year progresses and new information emerges, there might be some alterations I make to some of those strategies based on that new information that's come in. That's okay. But it just goes back to, I'm saying in Q1, I'm going to do these things. In Q2, we're going to do these things. In Q3 and Q4, we're going to do these things. And it just makes it so much easier to go through the year because you've already mapped it all out, right? And as I mentioned, that one specific strategy might have 20 things that you might have to work on to get that thing accomplished. So it's not like, oh, we just need to schedule these webinars and, we're done, right? No, at the end of the day, we have to be thinking about everything that goes into that webinar, the content, the delivery, the time that we do the webinars, the email cadences, as I mentioned, et cetera. So some common mistakes I find people make when they're setting goals, they set too many priorities. They try to do like 20 different things, right? Just have three priorities. Their strategies, another mistake, are too vague, right? So rewrite those strategies until you can hand them to a stranger and they know exactly what you're going to be doing on Monday morning. Another big mistake is they don't assign ownership to any of those strategies, right? So who owns the strategy? Like, who, in effect, is accountable for the strategy, such that if it doesn't happen, we know who to look at, right? Why didn't it happen? Why are we falling short? What happened? Is it the wrong strategy, or did you just drop the ball, right? And so based on that information, knowing who that owner of that priority and that strategy is, and sort of who has that accountability, will just help you manage your team throughout the year. And then lastly, one of the big mistakes is no scoreboard, right? And that comes back to our level 10 meetings where we're looking at these different metrics that we've established in these strategies and we're measuring them on a weekly basis. And even in our huddle, we're talking about our number one priority of the day, right? Or our number one metric, I should say, of the day. So, we're constantly talking about our metrics. So, bottom line is you don't have to overthink this thing. My 135 GPS document, literally, I just goal at the top. I have one row of three columns where I put the priorities. And then beneath that, I have another little chart that just is three columns by 5 rows. And I just type in those things. So it all fits on one page, simple, easy. I can look at it any minute, know exactly what I need to be working on. And once again, our team is doing the same. So bottom line is constraint is a strategy. When you limit what you're working on and only focus on those most important things, it frees you up because you're not, checking a lot of boxes on your to-do list that really aren't super relevant. You're only working on those most important things. Number two, making sure all these strategies, and really just in general, whenever you're talking to your team, make sure you're utilizing SMART goals, with one owner, weekly metrics, that all equals execution. When you have a SMART goal, one person responsible for it, and you're measuring the outcome, that's what execution actually looks like. And then number three, the rhythms matter more than the plan. You got to stay on top of it. You always have to be talking about your goals, your priorities, your strategies, reviewing them weekly in the level 10, adjusting monthly based on new information, and then on a quarterly basis, doing a reset. Did what we want to accomplish happen? Did it lead to the result we were hoping for? Should we do more of it? Should we do less of it? Or what now can we move on to now that we've checked that box and that goal has been accomplished? So, if you're interested in learning more about what we're up to at Ferris Capital Partners, go to fulloutinvesting.com. That's fulloutinvesting.com. We have a sample deal deck. We have a video that walks you through exactly our process from finding an asset to exit, and you can also book in a time to talk to us. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Multifamily Investor Playbook. If you found this content valuable, please like and subscribe and share with other high net worth individuals that you think could benefit from it. We love and believe in you. Have a wonderful day.